Welcome to Mooncast. I am Ada Pembroke,
And I'm Lauren from Tarot and Chai.
and today we're talking about the new moon in Aries for March 2022. So, we're going to start by looking at the chart of the moment for the new moon. If you'd like to see what we're seeing when we look at the chart, you will want to cast a chart for March 31st, 2022 at 11:24 p.m. Normally, we cast the charts for Austin, Texas, but this one is for Portland, Oregon. My hometown. Woo! Well, not really hometown, adopted town. So March 31st, 2022, 11:24 p.m., Portland, Oregon. So this new moon is at 11 degrees of Aries. And Aries is about courage. So you want to look at the house that contains 11 degrees of Aries to find where you are being called to plant new seeds of courage in your life during this new moon.
And for the collective, the sun and moon are going to be in the sixth house, which is shifting our focus to our day jobs, our routines, and our physical illness. So as far as how sixth house topics, it goes a little, when we think of sixth house topics, we think of all of the boring stuff, the routine stuff, getting up and brushing our teeth in the morning and going to work every day. All of the things that kind of build a schedule for us. And with the new moon in Aries, it kind of it puts an interesting twist on things, because how can a routine have anything to do with this, courageous sign that's bold and fiery and wants to go out and start a war, right? um, but Aries also brings a lot of those problems that are associated with the archetype of the warrior. Problems that, crop up in such an individual are things like stress and just, when you don't have a battle to fight and when you're not doing anything with that energy, the stress just continuously builds up, builds up, and builds up until you do something with it. And especially lately, we have all these mounting pressures in our work lives, just in general society, with everything going on in the world right now. And if
Great
we're not,
resignation. Woo!
oh, yeah. And if we don't have anywhere for this energy to go, it just continues building until it starts to have, even a physical impact, because stress can tear your body to pieces if you don't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, to kind of manage that, some activities that would be really fitting for the time would be to get out in the sun and tap into that healing energy of the sun,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is exalted in Aries. So the sun is in a very powerful position right now, especially with not a lot of opposition. It doesn't have too much bogging it down. So it's in this really powerful position, and it's a prime time to kind of tap into the energies associated with the sun. The other thing we want to do is pay attention to feelings of aggressiveness or actions that may come across as being a little more aggressive than intended. Because with the moon there, that's our, instincts and emotions and all the kind of underlying things that we might not notice. And with that, we might suddenly just snap at someone for no reason, or, take out that stress and aggressiveness on someone else. So we kind of want to be a little more attentive, since Aries also tends to be pretty impulsive. And the last way, probably my favorite way to kind of channel this energy, is I can't do this. Not with my current condition. But go running. And if you're like me and you have health issues that for some reason prevent you from doing that, find some kind of gym routine. Find a way to tire yourself out. This is an amazing time for a new workout routine, where you can really just channel that energy and burn off all of that anger and stress and anything that's kind of building up below the surface.
Absolutely. And if you're stuck in bed, first person shooter video games are going to be your jam.
There we go.
I really like what you said about the physical manifestations of stress. Each of the signs and each of the planets are assigned to different parts of the body, and Aries rules the head. And that image that you had of stress building until you kind of pop, like stress in Aries people and stress in Aries times um, tends to manifest as headaches. Tension headaches, especially, are big during this
Mm.
time. So, like, you know, get out the cold compresses and the bottle of Aleve or whatever your favorite headache remedies are, because this is this is one of those moons. I've been listening to a lot of stress reduction guided meditations recently, and that's another good thing too.
Mhm. And actually, what comes to mind is these cold packs that I have. They're a friend of mine makes them. She basically sews rice into these packs that you just throw in the freezer. And so during times
Oh,
like this, I keep a couple of them in the freezer.
I need to make some of those. I have a cold roller that I like to roll over my forehead when I have headaches, and like what you're describing sounds so much better, especially if I threw some like lavender in there. Oh,
Oh
that would be
yeah.
amazing. Oh,
And it
okay, that's
doesn't
my
get
new hobby.
so insanely cold that it's you can't tolerate it, which is the big problem I have with like the cold compresses.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that sounds fantastic. So, just like the full moon in Virgo, if you listen to our episode on the full moon in Virgo, you might remember that we talked about how there are a lot of planets at the bottom of the chart in that lunation. There were a lot of things that were going on underneath the surface, and like seeds that were preparing to grow under the surface. And um, this lunation also has a bunch of planets at the bottom of the chart. Interestingly, instead of being way down at the very, very bottom, like in fourth house or so, these planets have moved up to the sixth house. So it's almost like um, I don't know if this is a trend that's going to continue because I haven't looked at charts of the moment coming up, but the progression from last the full moon to the new moon is it's almost like the planets are being born in reverse. Like the moon and the sun are just underneath the horizon. They will have just set at the time of the new moon. So um, it's almost like the moon has descended from the mountaintops where she was looking out over the terrain and getting perspective and gathering wisdom. And um, now at the new moon, when she joins the sun, it's like she's bringing all of that wisdom into that cluster of planets down there in Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. Because even though the lunation has gone from the Virgo Pisces area of the chart to the Aries area of the chart, um, there's still a lot of activity going on in Aquarius and Pisces. We've got um, da, da, the Mars and Saturn and Venus are still in Aquarius. Um, Jupiter and Neptune are still in Pisces, and Mercury and Chiron are joining the Sun and the Moon in Aries. But you were going to talk more about that one.
Yeah. So with the Sun and Moon in Aries, we've got this interesting. Let me pull up this chart again. So this conjunction of four planets that are very tightly clustered together. We've got the Sun and the Moon there, of course, but we've also got Mercury and Chiron. And Chiron being there is a little tricky, especially on a
Mhm.
new moon, because Chiron can kind of look like, I guess, this bottomless rift. It's this gaping void, and conjunct the new moon. That's hitting our heart. It's hitting our emotions,
Mhm.
because Chiron is about, the wounds and trauma. We don't have that, love and light sort of healing associated with the full moon, where it's just all about healing and recovery, and we've got all this energy. The moon is dark, so we're kind of left with this just void to fill. The healing comes
Mm.
through reflection and introspection and shadow work, which is tough to say the least. There's
For
nothing light
sure.
about that.
No.
And it can feel awful, depending on where this is heading in your chart. It's heavy and it's depressing, but these transits feel so good once you've worked through them. That sort of healing can feel like a breath of fresh air after this long internal war. Because for me, these transits just feel, even if they're not in actuality that long, it feels like forever.
It really does.
Mm. And with Mercury there, maybe some of the healing comes from kind of voicing those wounds and emotional trauma. Um, just healing alongside others and sharing our experiences to kind of help pull others up after you.
I think that's really wise advice. Um, Being that it's at the new moon, and Mercury is so freshly into Aries, it's only going to be at 9 degrees at that point. So
Mhm.
Mercury will have spent an entire cycle going through Pisces at that point. And I think that at that point, it's possible that our voices are still going to be waking up from that logical slumber that Mercury kind of goes through when it goes through Pisces. Mercury in Pisces is um, the mind in the mind space of the poet. And it's possible, given that recent experience and given the newness of the moon and the darkness and the need to really feel your way through the dark instead of going by that bright sunlight, that uh, the noises that we make might be incoherent. You know, the battle cries of soldiers charging into battle, or the wails of um, grief and loss, and um, bad communication is one of the best ways I can think of to create conflict.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think a consciousness of the fact that even if we need to communicate, we may not necessarily be communicating well, might be a good way to avoid unnecessary conflict during the Aries new moon. But
Mhm.
it is an Aries, and Aries is the sign of the warrior. So, and sometimes you do need to fight for the things that you believe in. So, the question hanging in the air that night is going to be, is this a battle that you're choosing to fight, or is this a battle that's pointless and you're getting pulled into by accident almost?
Yeah, and especially with the impulsiveness of Aries, like, this isn't going to be a time that we can very easily just talk our way out of things.
Oh, yes.
Because we've got Mercury and Gemini, that's kind of like, it gives it this kind of silver tongued element. And
Hmm.
then Aries is just kind of the opposite. It's a little clumsy, it's impulsive, it's not very rational, and it's just, yeah, just very instinctual communication, which is not great in negotiations.
Yes,
Not that I would know
absolutely.
anything about that.
I have Mercury in Aries natally, and there is nothing better for burning bridges than a mouth that's running in Aries. I can say that from many experiences.
Oh, yeah. So that'll be an interesting one, especially with them. Well, I guess one aspect of that I didn't cover was looking just at the moon and Mercury together there specifically. It also means that we're more likely to speak from a place of emotion and feeling,
Mhm.
which again, if that's coming alongside anger and impulsiveness, is not going to do us any favors. It can be cathartic for you, but how much damage are you doing to that other person? What bridges are you burning?
Right. And some bridges do need to be burned, and
Mm-hmm.
there are some situations where if you don't just swallow your fear and jump in, you're never actually going to jump in.
Yeah.
Like, those polar bear dives on New Year's Day, but not that I've ever done one of those or ever are likely to do one of those, but, it
I'm not going to speak to that.
If anybody's gonna be swimming in icy water, it should be the person who grew up in New England that lives in Oregon now, but, um I wanna say, prepare your impulsiveness, but there's a part of me that's like, that is so my Saturn opposite my sun talking, how do you prepare your impulsiveness? But, consciousness makes all the difference, and, sometimes you've gotta do something rash and you're jumping into it, and you know that it's the right thing, but, um,
Yeah.
just, watching out for it in yourself and others on that day might be a good idea.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I think that's all I have to say on that one.
Alright, so we don't usually go into anything this detailed or deep in this podcast, but I have had the privilege of, getting to study some of the dwarf planets lately, and, so when I cast the chart for the moment for this talk, I happen to have Hamia and Sedna and Orcus and Gong Gong. I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that tonally, but up on my screen, and I was really surprised just how prominent the dwarf planets are in this particular lunation. So I thought I would talk about them for a couple of minutes. I want to highlight in particular two planets that are on the angles. Haumea is on the AC and Orcus is on the MC. So, Haumea, for those of you who don't know, is the Hawaiian goddess of creation and childbirth. Um, Haumea is in the Kuiper Belt. She is a really interesting, like, oblong planet. She doesn't kind of, gracefully spin around the sun. She kind of tumbles end over end. And she is unique in that she is the only planet that does not have an official discoverer. Two astronomers discovered her at around the same time, and there was some conflict over whether one astronomer stole the data from the other one, and so the IAU decided that they weren't going to assign a discoverer to Haumea. She's just going to be, listed as her own self out there, and she is the only modern planet that isn't, in some sense, owned by somebody. So it's like she's Mother Earth and nobody owns her, and I think that that's just fantastic. Um, So having Helmia on the AC, the AC is how you dawn on people. It's like, we've got this creation goddess who is so fecund that she doesn't just give birth to babies the normal way. She like gives birth to children out of like every part of her body, and she's like that Hawaiian, the islands are just like growing and growing as the earth is like building itself. And so having that on the AC is interesting, especially in contrast to the fact that Orcus is conjunct the MC. And Orcus is a another dwarf planet, another trans-Neptunian object who's in the Kuiper Belt. And in Roman mythology, Orcus is the lord of the underworld. Eventually, Orcus and Pluto got conflated in Roman mythology. And Orcus is associated with the more punishing side of the underworld. He's the lord of hell, essentially. And he was especially known as the god who punishes oath breakers. So there's this really strong contrast between the ascendant and the midheaven. You've got, the Lord of Hell all the way up at the top of the sky, in the same position as the moon roughly last time, like not exactly, but the last during the full moon, the moon was way up at the top of the sky. And this time we've got Orcus, the Lord of Hell, and it's like the Lord of Hell is surveying the situation that's going on the other side of the sky, and he is the one on the top of the mountain, and he's the one with distance. And yet, the thing that's dawning is a new creation. And like you can't think about Hawaii, of course, without thinking about volcanoes. And so, what the image that is coming to mind for me with this is the image of this like extremely violent volcanic eruption. Like things are just exploding. Lava is flowing everywhere. It's like flowing over cars, and it looks like hell. But what is actually happening is birth. I mean, I haven't gone through childbirth, but from what I understand, that's what childbirth is like. It's like, the mother is like getting torn open, and it looks like, the most violent thing. And what is happening is actually that something new is being born. So, um, I'm I'm optimistic that, despite all of the things that we were saying about Aries and stress and um, Chiron being there and wounds and inarticulate screaming, like I my wish for everyone is that these are actually the travails of the birth of something new, and not the screams of people being tortured in hell like it seems like at first.
It's just the looming threat that makes sure you get all your stuff in order.
Yeah, right? Because we all need more looming threats in our lives, right?
Yes. Actually, you kind of talking about this. Um, I think is painting a picture of. Have you seen Moana?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so there is this Disney movie about it's I guess somewhat loosely based on Polynesian mythology. I don't know how in depth it goes. Um, but there is this goddess in the series, um, Tafiti. She's supposed to be the kind of final boss, so to speak. She's this basically this lava monster going after everyone, and tearing up the land, and everyone's terrified of her, and just does everything they can to steer clear of her, not knowing who she is. It's just this monster to them. And towards the end of the series, there's this kind of cleansing and purification that happens, and she's revealed as the goddess Tefiti. Um, so it's through that kind of healing, of all the trauma and damage that had been done to her, and she emerges as this, goddess that eventually kind of heals and turns into an island that supports them. And it's this interesting kind of it's not actually based on any deity that I could find in history or anything like that. So I think it was mostly a construct, but it actually kind of well illustrates the connection between Hamea and Orcus, I think. And if we really want to dig into the mythology on our own time, um, if you look at when Haumea was actually discovered, um, Tafiti is actually a really nice symbol for everything that was going on around the discovery of Haumea. So it might be. So let me see if I can find. I was taking. I don't have my notes on me right now, but when we first were talking about, you did like some kind of lecture on dwarf planets a while back, and Haumea was kind of a focus for me because of where it was in my chart. But, um,
I was wondering when your kitty would make an appearance. Procrastinator.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Um, yeah, I can't find the chart, unfortunately, but I'll have to link to that if I can find it because it was really interesting. Um, yeah, just seeing that kind of symbolism. But basically, um, if you, yeah, I'll have to link the chart in the description. But I remember thinking that the discovery chart for Hamea was just really interesting because of the sort of relationship dynamics, and it's almost like and we also get into the moon and Chiron here a little bit because the goddess in the movie Tafiti, her, was injured due to a combination of like trickery and corruption. She wasn't always like this. She was made that way. She became bitter and she turned into this monster. And so the recovery is, I remember thinking that the chart was just kind of a perfect expression for that healing and recovery that you see later in the movie, where she's revealed to be that healing, that goddess of creation and birth and that sort of thing. And so I wonder if any part of that was maybe inspired by some of that story.
It could be. I mean, the discovery of Haumea and the decision to name her after a goddess who wasn't Greco-Roman was a pretty big deal, and from what I understand, it was a pretty proud moment for Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kinds of full moon activities do you think are, or sorry, not full moon, new moon activities are good for this lunation?
So, this is a good time to ask, with the sixth house focus, is how can you create a routine that supports your job, your work life, and your physical health, especially in terms of stress management.
Mm,
So, like I was saying earlier, building that workout routine to help manage your stress could be a good place to start. And as a result, kind of building those routines can contribute to being able to work from a better place where you're not always tired and burnt out, or feeling that building stress. So just really finding a way to develop those routines that can best support us.
absolutely. The
And
sixth house is really the house of the little things that add up to being a real lot, like brushing your teeth, like you said earlier.
yes, yeah. And as far as like the time of the year, we're going into the second quarter of the year. So this is a good time to kind of reflect on the goals and the intentions that we set in the new year. Um,
Mhm.
Reassess our goals and think about which things that we kind of wrote down are still in alignment with our current needs.
It sounds like your kitty got into like wrapping paper or something.
She did. I have a box just stuffed full of packing paper, and she's trying to hide in it. Oh, yeah. She has been my stress reduction.
Oh, kittens for everyone for the new moon in Aries.
Pet therapy.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so with the new quarter, this is a good time to reassess all those goals. And I actually made an Instagram post just last night. I was starting to feel like things were yeah, just kind of out of alignment. They didn't feel quite right. It feels like my focus has taken kind of a drastic shift.
Mm.
And so I just drew 3 cards to see like where my intention should be right now, to kind of bring things back into alignment. And I drew a card for mind, body, and soul. So that's kind of an exercise you can do if you're just really lacking clarity and you're not sure what your intention should be. It's just really interesting to see how it lines up, because mine was pretty spot on.
That sounds fantastic. I may do that spread like immediately after we're done with this.
But also with this focus on Aries, that kind of brings Mars into the picture. We might also consider, what are all the things that are no longer serving us? What do you need to tear down so you can start with a clean slate? We have the Tower listed as one of our cards in the new moon, or not the new moon, the magical moon bundle, the lunations calendar. The Tower is one of the cards that we've listed for this lunation, and I think that's incredibly relevant right now, because sometimes there is no room and we just have to either let things fall apart or, in true Aries fashion, just tear them down.
Yep. Sometimes burning your bridges is the right thing to do.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the lunations calendar in the magical year of the moon bundle. I was looking through the journaling prompts that we put in the calendar earlier, and I really love the question that you wrote down for this lunation, or one of the questions. There are some great questions in there, but you asked, what boundaries do you need to work on setting over the next cycle? Especially in terms of stress management and reinforcing the boundaries that you set at the new year. Um, and I thought that that is a fantastic question for people to take to their journals.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have
And
a link in the description to the moon bundle so that you can get the journals that we're using and the lunations calendar that we're talking about and everything.
Mhm. And I think the other thing with boundaries, like when we think of boundaries, we often think of Saturn. Um, but in this context, we're kind of thinking of who is going to defend those boundaries, who's going to fight for those boundaries. So it's kind of about, yeah, more reinforcing the boundaries that we know we should be setting, but we haven't really been holding up like we should.
Absolutely. In Mesopotamian mythology, actually, Saturn and Mars are warrior brothers. And Saturn is the god of order, and Mars is interestingly a bit like Orcus, the Lord of Hell, but it's like Saturn sets the rules, decides what order is, and Mars is kind of the enforcer.
Mm-hmm. Tag team, go.
Yay, Aries. Woo. So what are you going to be doing on to take advantage of the lunar energies?
So for this one, and of course with my Capricorn moon, it's going to be work related. Um, I wanted to take the time to kind of focus on some major transitions in my work life I've been going through. One, figuring out where these transitions fit in with my vocational goals, um, which, to kind of give you a picture of where this lunation is happening in my chart, it's in my sixth house, and it's trying my 10th house Mercury and my third house moon. And actually, almost a perfect trine, I think, off by maybe a degree or two. Yeah, they're off by like 1 degree. Um, so yeah, and taking those into account, I have lots of all the fire signs involved in this trine. Um, so yeah, focusing on those transitions, figuring out where they fit in with my goals, and creating a more supportive environment at work. Because I think one thing that we don't often associate with the third house, but should get some extra attention, is the third house can represent your work environment. As if we're thinking of like short term travel and communication and those kind of things that are just in our immediate environment. Um, yeah, your work environment can fit into the context of the third house.
So this might be a really good lunation to reboot your computer if you're running a Mac. It's a
Yes.
reminder that I need continually.
Yeah, so I'll be doing a little rearranging, and I'm actually, recently I had to move areas completely, and I've now got this little booth at the Fairy Moon. It's a local antique slash metaphysical store here in town,
Ooh.
and I've gone from doing readings at their craft table
Oh my
to
goodness.
yeah, I'm just reading at the back table, and sometimes just absolutely in the middle of chaos, like sitting there trying to get posts done. Uh, but no, they put me in this little booth, and so now I've got like this little secluded area, and you've got the very almost kind of stereotypical looking curtains where you have like the tarot reader behind the curtains.
Oh,
So
yes. The Scorpio rising is the wizard behind the curtain. Yes. Oh, that is perfect for you.
yeah, so I'm getting that in order, and I think that's gonna be part of my work next week.
Oh, that's fantastic. So this lunation is also in a hot spot for me. It is exactly conjunct my Venus in Aries, and I have a really highly connected chart. Pretty much everything in my chart either aspects the sun or the moon. I've got like I love doctrine of sect so much because my my chart really is divided into like two royal teams, and this lunation is sextile my Mars and Chiron and Ceres and Gemini. Um, it's sextile my moon in Aquarius and it's trine my ascendant. So it's like this moon really has its feelers and like everything in my chart.
Oh
Um,
well,
which is a really great way to get yourself overwhelmed and not do anything, speaking from experience. So
yeah,
I'm focusing on that Venus and kind of keeping my eyes on all those other things, especially that Mars and Chiron going on in Gemini in my 11th house. um, but I'm really seeing this as like a new start for my relationships. I'm going through a really transitional time in my relationships anyway, and the way that Venus has been besieged between Saturn and Mars is really Oh, it is playing out so literally in my life right now, and I'm watching the way that Venus is liberating herself, and I'm really hoping that by the time the new moon in Aries happens, I'm gonna be able to celebrate like being free of the malefics and free to really start to birth something new in my relationship life at the risk of
Mm.
sounding hugely cryptic, but yeah. I'm really going to
Um,
be leaning on that Haumia energy for sure during this lunation. Hopefully not too literally because that would be a surprise.
it's interesting that we both have soft aspects from the moon to Chiron.
Yeah. Mine is pretty close. I've got Chiron at 7 degrees and the moon at 8 degrees, both in air signs, so it's like disassociation city.
Oh, see, my Chiron is up there with Mercury at 10 degrees of Leo.
Oh, that is interesting. I've got Chiron and Gemini, and you've got Chiron with Mercury. We've both got like a thing with talking and being heard going on, don't we?
Yep.
And now we have a podcast.
For better or for
It's
worse.
that has absolutely nothing to do with it at all. Oh, this is fantastic. Okay, so um since we're coming up on the 45-minute mark, I think we might be able to get this under an hour. Yay! So are you doing anything that you like want to tell people about? And how can people find you on the internet, your socials, all the blah blah?
So I am starting vocational readings now that I kind of have a new structure for them. So I have come across this amazing book by oh my goodness, um, Brian Clark. Brian Clark, yes. It's basically an entire cookbook and then some for vocational astrology. So I've kind of been implementing some of what I've been learning there more into my readings. So I've completely restructured those. And you can find me at tarotandchai.com, which we'll have in the description.
Mhm. Awesome. And on social, you can find me on Instagram at Ada Pembroke, and you can also find me on adapembroke.com and Patreon at Ada Pembroke. I don't have anything that I'm releasing that's too new. I am open for more readings, and I'm thinking about releasing a new, shorter reading availability for people who just want to, say hi and see what I'm about and so on. But it used to be that you had to wait 2 weeks in order to book a reading, but I have shortened that to 24 hours. So if you if you want to impulse buy a reading from me, that is now a thing that you can do.
Alrighty, and I think that's all from me.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. This has been fun as always.
Yes, thank you, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.